Countdown to kickoff time is here. Vince D'Addario, Sean Stiers. Jesse's not with us this week. He is actually coming into town for the game this weekend. So
Love it. Love it.
yes, as we speak, he is on his way from Cleveland to South Bend. So
Nice.
he's looking forward to getting in. He hasn't been to a game for a while. So
Really?
yeah, looking
I
forward to
guess
going
that
to the game.
it would make sense. I mean, he's what, 3-4 hours away, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So, that would make sense.
Yep. Well, Notre Dame's coming off a bye week, Vince. We ended our bye earlier this week, and they, of course, won very handily against USC, 48-20. How much do you think they needed that win?
I know how much we needed that win. But as far as the team needing that win, I would say they definitely needed it. And it was, look, I think we can safely say at this point, Marcus Freeman does a really good job of getting his team up for big games. Like they had a nice sized chip on their shoulder because of what happened last year at USC. Mm-hmm. They know it's a rivalry game. They knew the stakes, all of those different things. They were ready to play this game. And obviously it showed offensively and defensively. They needed it though, because, of where things were, just a week prior, they needed it. They needed it badly. And they came out in dominating fashion. I mean, if I would have told you, or if you would have told me that they were going to win the game, I would have never in a million years guessed 48-20 and the manner in which they got to that final score. So it was needed on all parties, man. All accounts across the board, it was needed.
I agree. And I really think that the defense just itself needed a game like that, where the defense said, you know what? We can put this team on our backs against the best quarterback in the nation. Arguably at that time, the best offense in the nation. I mean, it was the leading scoring offense in the nation. At least that's for sure. And the fact that the offense was able to capitalize when they were given the ball and punch it into the end zone and do some good things. And of course, you're stinging coming out off that loss to Louisville. And you talk about there's no real path to the college football playoff. It would take a miracle at this point to be talking college football playoff, but there is still the distinct possibility of playing in a New Year's Six Bowl. And you lose that game, that's not going to happen. Then you lose that game, you're starting to talk about, is it going to be Gator Bowl again, Holiday Bowl, one of those kind of bowls. So it doesn't necessarily completely save the season, but it at least saves what the outlook for this season still can be. And you beat your biggest rival. And, as you said, we know Marcus Freeman can get this team up for big games. Now they've kind of got to figure out that middle ground, because there is still, like, Louisville obviously looks a heck of a lot worse after they turned around and laid an egg against the team that Notre Dame is going to play this weekend, the week after they beat Notre Dame.
Which, for a team like Louisville, who, on paper is not as good as Notre Dame, that was an upset. It was an upset. When Louisville beat Notre Dame, it was an upset.
Yeah.
When a team gets up that high and wins a game like that, the eventual downfall the next week is almost inevitable. I mean, we see it all the time, right? So It wasn't overly surprising that was the case the following week. It was a little surprising that it happened against Pitt, because Pitt is just a bad football team, in my opinion. And they remain a bad football team, as we go into today's game against them for Notre Dame. They're a bad football team. Can they beat Notre Dame? Anybody can beat Notre Dame. Anybody can beat anybody on any given Saturday. But if Notre Dame plays even remotely the way they should obviously win this game. But, this Pittsburgh team is something else, man, with the different things that they've had going on and the change at quarterback and, a handful of kids on that team are from Notre Dame. Like, It's just, there's a lot of storylines here, obviously. And of course, then there's the Pat Narduzzi side of things. And so there's just a million different things going on with this week. But, Notre Dame winning against USC. And I had multiple people texting me actually during the game. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter anymore. Like, the season's over, all these different things. It's like, maybe it's over for you, but it's not over for these kids. I mean, they still got to go out and play these games. This is still their biggest rival, and I don't care what your excuse is. USC is Notre Dame's biggest rival, and it was a rivalry game, and there was all kinds of stuff, hanging in the balance for that team, right? And at the end of the day, they still have a New Year's Six Bowl to play for, in my opinion. Now, we said it at the beginning of the year. 10-2 is the absolute floor. I don't feel any different. I still feel that exact same way, Sean. It is the floor. But right now, that's the best that you can do.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
You have to run the table to meet the floor.
I was going to say, now it's got to be the floor.
Yeah. Because now it's the ceiling. Floor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's right. I don't understand the whole, the season's over as soon as you're not. And it's like, that's what people talked about, the concern with going to a college football, going to a playoff thing, that you're going to, negate the relevance of the regular season. And that's obviously happened as soon as,
sure,
especially if you're Notre Dame, because you don't have a conference championship
conference title
to play for.
The conference title or the conference people are out in full force. Well, if you still had a conference, you could still be playing for the conference championship. You'd have a chance of getting into the college. No, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't have a chance of getting into the college football playoff because no two-loss team has ever made it in.
Right.
Is there a mathematical possibility that Notre Dame could make it in? Sure. But there's an awful lot of stuff that would have to happen.
Way too much. Way too much.
Way too much realistically, right? There's no way that all happens. So even if they won their conference championship, they're still not getting in because they still got 2 losses. So at the end of the day, yes, they play for national championships. No question, right? But you also play to win every game that you play.
The only thing that being in a conference would help would getting an automatic bid to a New Year's Six Bowl if you won a conference championship game. But
that's fair.
Again, you win out, you're probably going to be there anyway. That's just the way that it works. There's still a chance that they could get left out, but
sure,
we're probably going to be in if they win out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, because that happens a lot. So with the Rose Bowl, for example, being a college football playoff game, does the Big Ten and the Pac-12 champion automatically get into the New Year's Six? Or they're just now at large, right?
Whew. Now you're throwing.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, that's all right. You're throwing one at me right now. That's a good question. I'm not exactly sure.
I mean, the odds.
Someone's going to post the answer.
I'm sure. The odds of the Big Ten champion and the Pac-12 champion being in the college football playoff, I think, are pretty good if we're looking at the rankings and the way things are going, right? Because it's you're looking at Michigan, Ohio State on one side, you're looking at Washington potentially on the other. Like if they win out and they win their conference title, they're in the Final Four.
I want to say the next best team in each conference still makes a New Year's Six Bowl as long as they meet the other qualifications. Like being in the top 12 or whatever. It is.
All right. So I just don't know. I honestly, and this is, I don't know what the affiliations are of. I just know that there's more at large bids. Now, maybe some of those get eaten up by the next best, Big Ten team or whatever, which is definitely a possibility. But I did see a projection today on X that had Notre Dame in the Peach Bowl against Washington, I believe, which I thought was an interesting. I think that'd be a fun matchup.
I think it's interesting that even though Washington has beaten Oregon, there's more people thinking that Oregon is going to end up being like the higher ranked team.
That's ridiculous.
Guess they're thinking they're going to win a rematch in the Pac-12 championship, or I don't know.
I guess. I don't know.
Very interesting.
I find that to be very interesting. Yeah.
As for Notre Dame itself, how much do you think they needed this bye that they're coming out of right now?
Oh, they needed it big time. Look, we've seen what Notre Dame looks like without all of their healthy wide receivers. Even then, people would say that their wide receiving core isn't all that fantastic. But when you sideline their 2 best receivers, statistically, over the first 4+ games, right? Jaden Greathouse, Jaden Thomas, you basically sideline those guys. Yes, they've made some cameos. They've been out there for 10 reps or whatever, blocking, and okay, fine. But for the most part, they've been sidelined. And you sideline the two best players that they've got on the outside, your offense doesn't look great. And this bye hopefully has allowed those guys to rest those hamstrings, get back to 100% or as close to 100% as you can possibly be. That way this offense can now pick up a little bit more where they left off the first 4 games, right? I mean, this offense has been a shell of itself. Like, we've seen these actual players together play really well, just not recently, because I think that they're, no pun intended, hamstrung by the guys that aren't available to them. And there's other issues too, but they needed this bye week just to get those kids healthy.
I think so too. And like, when you look at the fact that, like, even Audric Estime was not, he had 95 yards against USC. It was not a dominating 95-yard performance, but that was coming on the heels of 20 yards against Louisville. They had gone against some better teams. That run of 4 straight night games, 4 ranked opponents who are all unbeaten, and coming out of there with a 2-2 record, laying that egg against Louisville, but then being able to bounce back. And I think kind of getting some of that energy, and then I do think that, as I've kind of sat back and looked on it, I think maybe I downplayed the 8 straight games to open the season, because let's be honest, there have been other Notre Dame teams that have played 8 straight games to open up a season within the last 30 or so years. I think there was like 4 or something like that, and they all had fairly decent years. It was not a great detrimental factor, but and even like last year's team, after their bye, they played 8 consecutive games after that to close the season. But I just feel like when you factor in that stretch of the night games and the higher level competition they were playing, and then you go back to the fact that they played in week 0. They opened training camp a week earlier than they usually do, which means that, like, they're still going through summer conditioning and all that stuff. So they probably didn't get quite as much, kind of downtime in between. They weren't going to get a ton anyway, but probably not as much in between summer conditioning and training camp. And then to basically go 12, 13 straight weeks without a break, it just takes a toll. And then those injuries that you talked about specifically are very key injuries to getting this offense back on track. So, like, between the running backs, like Estime getting a little bit more rest, those wide receivers hopefully getting more healthy, I think they really needed it. Yeah,
mentally, physically, you can even throw in the whole self-scout thing, right? I just think that it was a much needed situation. And I'll tell you what, the games that they have in the rearview mirror versus the games that they have in front of them, man, it's like night and day. I mean,
I know.
I just feel extremely confident about the latter stretch here than what the gauntlet, frankly, that they went through. And I downplayed it too. I'll be honest with you. I mean, okay, 8 weeks in a row. High school kids play 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks in a row.
Exactly.
So I downplayed it. There's no question about it. Now, what the high school kids do not have to do is travel and do all the things that college kids have to do, that kind of a thing. So, I mean, that is legit, right? The travel is what takes it out of you, not necessarily the game itself. The travel can be a real kick in the tush, right? Especially those night games, because you're leaving when that game is over and you're traveling until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, depending on where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And so that wears on you for sure, right? It wasn't the games, like, even for us, it wasn't necessarily the games and when they ended that wore on me. It was the post-game show that didn't get over till 3 a.m. or whatever, right? Like, that's it's stealing your sleep.
There's a lot that comes with it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's because, like, from our aspect, you hit it on the head. It's not just the time that you spend during the game, but it is everything that comes after the game. And that game ends. You still have to take care of whatever at that night. You still have to get home. You get up Sunday. There is still more work that has to be done on Sunday. And we're talking about both for us and for the football team. And then you hit Monday and you start it all over again.
Right.
It's just everyone's on a hamster wheel for all of those once that season's. I mean, I'll be the first to admit too, like, those 8 weeks to me just flew right by. I couldn't believe how fast they went.
Oh, Absolutely.
Because you're on that hamster wheel and it doesn't let up.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I didn't think about it that way. You're absolutely right. It went incredibly fast, and then all of a sudden, like last weekend, everything came to like a screeching halt.
Yeah.
It was like, okay, reset button, for everybody.
Right.
And yeah, it was long for everybody. Let's put it that way. And I am no way comparing myself to what the players and the coaches were putting themselves through. But it wore on us. And if it wore on us, I can only imagine what it felt like to them is the point, I guess, that I'm making.
Yeah. Us, it's just like we're older, we're a little more sleep deprived.
Right.
Like those young guys, they can just sleep at the drop of a hat, man. Like they get all the sleep they need, But I mean, it's obviously much more like for them, it is both physically and mentally demanding. For us, it's just a little bit more on the mental side, I think.
Yep, for sure.
And the age side.
I mean, we're old. Let's be honest.
Right. That's exactly right. So when you look at this team coming out of the bye week after 8 games, you feeling better about the offense or the defense right now?
Oh, I think it's the defense for sure. I feel real good about where the defense is. I mean, after the display that they put on against USC, I mean, what was it? 6 sacks, 3 picks, couple forced fumbles. Like they were on fire, man. Like everything they did was perfect in that particular game, right? And you hope obviously that they can build on that and maybe even be better moving forward. I mean, that would be fantastic. It takes a lot of pressure off the offense. And, the offense did what they had to do. They were given the ball in great field position, but they scored touchdowns. I mean, they scored in those field positions. We've seen plenty of times where that has not been the case, right?
Yeah.
And so I have to give credit to the offense because they did what they were supposed to do, but the defense put them in great position. I mean, that defense was flying all over the place. And when you've got 2 lockdown corners, you've got a safety that was making all the plays that he made, that other safety tends to kind of fall through the cracks a little bit, right? When you've got the 3 other guys playing at such a high level. And I thought the linebackers, the defensive line, I mean, they all played great, right? And Al Golden went from, on the hot seat to Broyles Award winner. You know what I mean? Like that's it, the 180 of people's opinions on Al Golden, I think is hilarious. But it's the defense for me for sure.
Defense kept him in all 4 of those games. Like when even the Louisville game, they kept him in it as long as they could, and then Louisville just the dam kind of broke toward the end because the defense was just on the field so much because the offense was never able to sustain anything. It's like when you look at the fact that they played their best football against the 4 best teams on the schedule, in theory, anyway. We see, like Clemson's still going to be a good team. The record doesn't show it right now.
Sure.
They're going to be good, but at least they're at the very least the 4 best teams that they have faced, and they're going to be the only 4 ranked teams that they face because we know Clemson's not going to be ranked, regardless of how good or bad they might be. But it's
rough.
It's really coming into the season. I think we were all more bullish on the offense than the defense.
Oh, yeah.
To me, it's really flipped right now because there's some things that the offense obviously has to get figured out.
It's funny that you say that because looking back, obviously, to like August, July, whatever, we all thought that, right? We thought this offense was going to just be putting up points left and right. But, what about the defensive line? What about the safety position? What about when are they going to get these old farts away from linebacker and put the new guys in and, the young blood and, all these different things. And the tables have kind of turned a little bit. Like, yes, there was a question mark at wide receiver going in, but I think, we were all a little bit more bullish on the wide receivers than what they have turned out to be. I think that's at least fair to say, right? I think we all thought that they were going to be the weaker link, but hey, Sam Hartman's going to turn them into a great group and then, all of these different things, right? And I think Sam Hartman has underachieved to a degree as well. I think we can all agree on that too.
Right.
And then the offensive line hasn't been, I think, what they've been a little too much of this.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen them here, but just too much up and down. Like it's one thing to kind of have a steady incline, but it's been up and down for them, right? So that's
and again,
been a little disappointing.
It's funny because those first 4 games, even though like I think that we kind of looked at the interior offensive line with a little bit more critical eye, and we kind of got scolded every now and then by the people. What are you talking about? There's nothing wrong with this offensive line. But then What happened when they started playing the better competition? Some of those warts started coming through, and you saw some of that. There are some questions there that have to be answered, and that becomes a different thing. And I do think that it's interesting, though, that kind of the flip side, not that the defensive line wasn't playing well, but it felt like they were really not being unleashed in those first 4 games.
Agreed.
Whereas, especially by the time maybe you got to, Duke and these last 3 games, especially, maybe not quite as much against Ohio State. You got to these last 3 games, we really started to see what we thought this defensive line could be with some of the disruptions that they've caused.
Yeah, the disruptions have been, obviously culminating in the USC game, right? Those was an unbelievable performance. And we all remember we were going into it and we had listened to some of Marcus Freeman's comments, and it was like, we're going to turn them loose, but we're going to do this. And I was like, oh man, what does that mean? But they turned them loose. Like, those guys were able to get after the quarterback. It wasn't just beat your guy, hold your space. And we saw a little bit too much of that, previously. And I think now they're starting to see, hey, we've got a terrific secondary right now. We can send these guys and take advantage of some coverage sacks and some coverage, things in the back end. So we can send the front end with a little bit more leisure, a little bit more frequency, I should say.
Right.
And I think Al Golden has seen that a little bit more too, right? And he's not bringing these exotic pressures so much anymore, at least not with the exuberance that he was sending stuff earlier, right? It was more, the pressures were coming from the second level, not the first level. Now they're coming from the first level with some additional help from the second level every now and again. And I think that's where this defense can be the best that it can be, and how they will build on what they've been doing moving forward. It's like, let those guys at the front eat, and let those linebackers just scrape and make plays.
Yeah.
They don't have to be triggered. Like, just let them play, and all of a sudden they're playing really well.
Absolutely.
It's
hopefully we see that continue.
Yes. Hey, you make a really good point, because it feels like we see something great and then it just goes away, right?
Right.
And Chris Tyree, for example, like we see something amazing and then all of a sudden he just disappears, and most of that's because of the play calling, right? And so, yeah. So,
and that's what's hard. That's what's so hard to figure out about this offense. It still feels like they're trying to do too much with like just mix and match too much personnel rather than kind of stay with a base package of guys, or at least more minimal substitutions, and just go out there and do your thing. Play to your strengths. I don't know. Like, I think we all would have known what the strength was probably through 4 games, but after 8, I really don't know what the strength of the offense is right now, unfortunately.
That's fair. Maybe the running backs. I don't know. Either way,
I think the running backs can be, but they haven't been. That's not how the games have played out.
And I don't think they're utilizing them the way they should, but that's a different conversation too.
I agree. So now it's Pittsburgh, and of course, Pitt beat Louisville the week after Louisville beat Notre Dame, and then last week Pitt turns around and loses to Wake Forest, who of course Notre Dame is going to play here in a few weeks on Senior Day. But so it's been a crazy kind of turn in the old ACC Notre Dame world, and they're led by Pat Narduzzi, who was the defensive coordinator at Michigan State for 7 years before he took over as the Panthers head coach in 2015. He is 65-45, very respectable record Pat Narduzzi has at Pitt, including a 42-28 record, 42-28 record in the ACC. But my question, Vince, why does Notre Dame live without the benefit of paying rent in Pat Narduzzi's head? I don't get it.
I'm sure there's a story behind all of this.
Has to be something that triggered it, right?
It has to be, right? Maybe like the bully in his school was a Notre Dame fan, or there's some sort of a traumatic experience in his life that has to do with Notre Dame, and he just brings it up all the time. Like, his press conference the other day, he brought up Notre Dame from like 2009 or something, like a phantom call or something along those lines.
The last time they were here, when they played here 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's what it was. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, that didn't even have anything to do with the question that he was even asked.
Right.
Which is just, I don't get it. I really don't understand it. His hatred for Notre Dame, the fact that he brings Notre Dame up all the time is, frankly, it's fascinating. There's a psychology major out there that could write a paper about him and his obsession with Notre Dame and get a really good grade, I would imagine.
Yeah, because this is not a recent thing either. It's like he's one of the, of the ACC coaches, he's one of the more outspoken about the fact that he thinks that Notre Dame should either be in the ACC or get off my lawn, get out of my life.
Right.
Like he does not want Notre Dame around if they're not going to be full-fledged in the ACC. So I'm sure that he's nice and surly about the fact that he's got to come into South Bend this weekend. And I had kind of forgotten about this because there's so many other connective tissues that we'll get to here in just a second, in terms of former players who have played at Notre Dame who are on the Pitt side. But Kenny Minchie was a Pittsburgh commit before Notre Dame flipped him around a year or so ago. So I'm sure he's probably, not too happy about that aspect of it either.
Well, he's 0-3 versus Notre Dame as the Pitt head coach, and the first one was 42-30. The second one was 19-14. So good on him for keeping it close.
That was that 2018 game. That was,
yes.
They made Ian Book, remember Ian Book? That was the start of Ian Book's career, really, in 2018.
Yeah.
Yep. He was on a roll, and Pitt came in and made life miserable for Ian Book that afternoon at Notre Dame Stadium.
You have a good memory. But then the next time they faced him in 2020, it was 45-3. So he hasn't really fared all that well against Notre Dame. And,
I was trying to remember, like that 40-3 game. I think that we were thinking that Pitt might, put up a little bit more fight than what they did in that game because they were supposed to have a pretty good defense that year. But
yeah, that's right. They had like a really good D line, right? Is that what I'm remembering?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Yeah. And Notre Dame just completely neutralized them. It was ugly.
Yes. Yes, it was. But in any case, Pat Narduzzi, not high. Notre Dame is not high on his list. He's got Phil Jurkovec on the roster, who, of course, started his career at Notre Dame, played the last 3 years at Boston College. He got benched a couple of games ago, so Phil is not going to be able to, unless something happens to Christian Veillere, who took his place, who, has been a better quarterback in, the couple games. He's been on the field, I think, 4 or 5 games this season. He, has played some relief of Phil, but one thing I did want to clarify.
No.
Jurkovec has not moved to tight end. He did ask about playing tight end after they benched him, but they said, no, you're going to still be the number 2 quarterback. You're not moving to tight end. So I think someone might have heard us talking about this earlier this week. He is not a tight end. I never said that. He is the number 2 quarterback.
You know what's funny is I just pulled up the notes that we get sent, like Pitt's notes, right? He's listed as the 3rd string quarterback.
Wow.
So even if Christian, whatever his name is, Veillere or whatever.
Veillere, from what I understand from the pronunciation.
Wow.
So
they just made that up based on how it's spelled, but whatever.
He's French-Canadian.
He certainly is. But since he's 3rd string, they have a sophomore, Nate Yarnell, listed as the number 2. So even if the guy goes down, Phil's still going to be the backup. Man. Like, how far has he fallen? I mean,
it really is amazing. He has fallen just so far off the map. And in his defense, he had a horrible offensive line at Boston College. He was just getting beat up all the time.
And he played well, like when he was healthy. He actually played well at Boston College.
That first year, he played pretty well. Yeah.
And they were coming back, and they were winning games they shouldn't have won. And they started getting nicked up. And then the next year, the offensive line was just god-awful.
Atrocious.
I mean, it was just awful. And there was nothing he could do. But I just think he's gotten his brains beat in for so long that he's either seeing ghosts or they're actually there, and he's just not playing well. I mean, he's just not playing well.
Is there any part of you that wishes we were going to see him play for Pitt this weekend?
There's a huge part of me that wants to see him play for Pitt because there was a huge part of me that wanted to see him play for Boston College when they came to Notre Dame Stadium. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For closure for him, to be honest with you, I mean, it wouldn't have gone well. Notre Dame still would have won, and they probably would have enjoyed putting him on his back a few times. But there's a lot of kids that I think are playing for Notre Dame right now that don't even know who Phil is. Like, that's how long
true.
it's been.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, he wasn't even on the team when Marcus Freeman was the defensive coordinator. So
True.
Marcus doesn't even know who this kid is. So
I don't think there's anyone on the staff itself who was here when he was here. Mike Elston's gone, obviously. Tommy Reese is gone.
The only one would have been like Bayless, and he's gone now too.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, it would have been nice closure for him, but it would not have ended well. You know what I mean? But yeah, right. I would have liked to see that storyline. I would have loved to see him come and play.
Well, that's a good point. I think he probably needed to. And,
right.
There was a lot of speculation about, well, did he just go to Notre Dame or from Boston College to Pittsburgh because Pitt's going to go to Notre Dame? I mean, he's obviously from Pittsburgh.
Sure.
But who knows? Maybe that was part of it. Maybe he looked and saw, okay, maybe he looked at Notre Dame's schedule and said, what would be the best opportunity for me to be able to go there and, kind of stick it to him and show him.
Listen,
I don't know, because obviously he's very bitter based on the Instagram post last year.
Correct.
He still carries a lot of bitterness, even though, as we said, like anyone connected to anything that happened to him here at Notre Dame is long gone now.
I would not put any mental gymnastics past Phil Jurkovec at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, if you're asking me to try to understand what he's thinking, good luck. Like, I just wouldn't even venture to guess. And there's a very good possibility he sat down and tried to figure out who's going to Notre Dame Stadium and where he could transfer, that he could play there. If you told me that was true, like you had an inside source that told you that, I would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, I see that. You know what I mean? Like, but then there's another part of me. It's like, come on, no way. He just went to his hometown school, whatever.
Yeah.
But I would believe it. I would.
Yeah. Their offense, though, not good.
No. And they're going up against Notre Dame's defense. Like,
yeah.
Oh.
They rank 95th in pass efficiency and 112th in rushing yards per game. Sibo Flemister is their leading rusher, another former Notre Dame guy in his second year there. He was their leading rusher last year. He's only got like 240 some rushing yards, if that tells you the state of their rushing offense right now.
Not great, obviously. I'm happy for Sibo. I think he's the best running back that they have on the roster. I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, and he would have been passed up here at Notre Dame. I mean, there's just too much talent in that room. Sibo's a great kid, I'm sure, but he's not as talented as the running backs there at Notre Dame. And so he made the wise decision to go play someplace else where now he's the featured back. And, obviously not killing it yards wise, but he's playing. He's playing every day.
So. And I mean, that's what he wanted. Opportunity to go play somewhere, and he's getting it.
And I can't blame him for that. I really can't. Like, look, if you aren't going to be playing in the NFL, which I think we can all probably safely assume that Sibo Flemister probably isn't going to play in the NFL, then go find some place to, if you want to play, go find some place to play. Like, I do not.
Well, but I'm sure in his mind, he at least left here thinking he had a shot at playing in the NFL. Sure. And, and that factors into it too. It's like, I'm buried on the depth chart here because at the time.
Yeah, good point.
It was Kyron Williams. And then you had these young guys like Price and Estime were starting to emerge about the time that he left. And you don't have to be playing for the best team in the country or even a top 25 team in the country to end up in the NFL if you can show what you can do. And he was playing for a Power 5 school. It just, hasn't quite worked out that well.
Right.
But he's at least been able to play. So just like Shane Simon, the linebacker, he is their fourth leading tackler this year. He had 27 tackles in his 3 seasons at Notre Dame. He's got 27 already this year. He had 48 last year. So, he's got more play, more production, and, been able to get out there on the field. He's playing better than what he was playing when he was at Notre Dame. And both of these guys, Flemister and Shane Simon, got their Notre Dame degrees in 3 years. So they got their Notre Dame degree before they transferred. And, like Marcus Freeman said earlier this week, that's the biggest thing, that like he really feels bad if guys are going to transfer, if they leave here without getting their Notre Dame degree. Like Tyler Buckner left without getting a Notre Dame degree. So did Drew Pine, for that matter. They both left short of that. So at least these guys, they got their degree and went on and played someplace else.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And I think the same thing goes for Shane Simon that was for Sebo Flemister. I think he probably saw the writing on the wall as far as playing time. Probably wasn't going to be great. And now he's playing. And he's playing well for Pitt. And that's great. Yep. That's great.
Not a great defense, but at least an average to maybe a slightly above average defense. They're number 26 in the country in total defense. 95th, though, in pass efficiency defense. That's what stands out to me, but also 45th in rush defense. So, again, fairly average across the board. But what is your confidence that Notre Dame can get its offense back on track against the Panthers this Saturday?
Well, with a healthy, with Jaden squared being healthy, and we are assuming that is the case, right? I think they have a good chance of getting some things back on track, especially the number 95 pass efficiency defense. I think that's the big one, right? Notre Dame, what they've been lacking has been the pass game the past few games, right? I mean, it just hasn't been fantastic. And we have notated often that they're neglecting the outside wide receivers. Well, your outside wide receivers were basically injured, right? Or they were Tobias Merriweather.
Yeah.
And so I know Marcus Freeman said they want to do some things to get Tobias the football. I think this is a great week to do that against, a bottom quarter defense in pass efficiency. And again, you're going to get Greathouse back. You're going to get Thomas back. You're going to have some weapons on the outside that they're going to have to pay attention to. They're going to get the ball to those guys, and that's just going to open up the inside with, Tyree, Faison, the whole deal. So I do like them, and I hope they have a concerted effort to put the ball in the air and get these guys some touches, because it'll obviously open up the run game as well, which I think we can assume that they're going to do pretty well. And so, yes, I think my confidence level, we're doing like a scale of 1 to 10, I would be like a 7.5 in that neighborhood that they get the offense back on track. I'm not expecting them to score like 50 points or 45 points or something along those lines, offensively anyway. But I do think they are going to be much more efficient with their drives, ending in touchdowns and things of that nature.
The way to do it is with that, what you just talked about with the passing game and those outside receivers specifically. And I think if they use play action a little bit more to their advantage, especially on early downs, I think that's when we haven't seen them really attack the field on early downs, it seems like. And when you have been so good and you've shown that you want to run the ball, and if you look across the other side of the field and you see a stacked box, seems like the perfect time to use that play action and then take a shot to one of those guys downfield. Because that's where, like, Pitt is notorious, physical, man-to-man defense. And again, why did they give Ian Book such a hard time? Well, because Ian Book just wanted to throw short, quick passes, short to intermediate stuff, and he wasn't going to challenge downfield. That's where Sam Hartman, I think, is going to have to make his hay to loosen things up in this game. He needs to be able to hit some shots downfield, and specifically with some of those outside guys like you were talking about. And if they're back at full strength, I think that they'll be in really good shape and be able to mix things up and have a pretty solid looking day.
Well, and, it's like we've said for years, right? You can't just let them load the box and dictate what you want to do offensively. You have to dictate to the defense what you want them to do. And if they're going to go man-to-man, you got to win some of those matchups. You have to. And look, I got a lot of faith, in the slot guys winning their matchups. I got a lot of faith about those two guys, right? I have a lot of faith there. I have less faith. Doesn't mean I have none. I have less faith on the outside guys and what they're able to do. But the last few games, the outside guys have been getting open, They're just not getting the ball thrown to them.
Right.
And there's a lot that has to do with that. Like a lot of those guys weren't even practicing during the week. And so, they didn't have that comfortability with Sam Hartman and all of those. Like there's
trust is a big factor too.
Absolutely.
Trust, like you show a couple times that you're not going to win some of those battles for the ball. The quarterback's not going to keep throwing to you.
Why would he?
Yeah.
And I don't blame him for that. I really, really don't. I do not blame him for that. What I'm hoping is that those guys were all able to practice all week long. They've developed some more chemistry. They've gotten back in the groove with some of these injured guys, maybe with Tobias as well, where it's like, hey, I've got faith that you're going to win that 50-50 ball. I've got faith you're going to win that back shoulder, throw, all of those different things. And then we see it on Saturday afternoon as well. Right. Saturday afternoon, Sean. Afternoon.
Bingo, baby. Vince, are you ready for rapid fire?
I've been ready the entire time. Let's go.
All right, here we go. Scale of 1 to 10. What's your confidence Notre Dame will win out against Pitt, Clemson, Wake Forest, and Stanford?
It's pretty high, to be honest with. Excuse me. To be honest with you, I feel really good about where this team is, and I feel good about where this team is primarily because of the way the defense is playing. And the old adage is, you can't win if you can't score. I got a lot of faith in this defense holding a lot of these offenses down. Specifically, Pitt, Wake Forest, Stanford, Abs. Like I feel real good about those three. Yeah, you throw Clemson into the mix. It's going to be an afternoon game, which I think obviously benefits Notre Dame because they're not going down there at night and, the whole atmosphere and all of that. So it's going to be in the afternoon, whether it's noon or 3:30. And I just think that this Clemson team is just teetering on the edge, right? And Notre Dame has the ability to push them right off the edge. And so I'm pretty high. I'm like an 8, like an 8.5 on my confidence level that they're going to win out. I just think that this team is playing differently. I don't think we're going to see a Louisville situation moving forward. They know what they're playing for at this point. And yes, they knew what they were playing for against Louisville as well. I get that. But I'm just saying, I feel like we're going to see this defense really take some major steps, and the offense is going to be like, hey, don't forget about us, and take some steps as well.
I think that this week is going to be really telling because you're coming out of the bye. You've got to reset all those health factors that we talked about. And this is a Pitt defense that can make you play a little bit ugly if you let them. And I think that there's going to be a lot riding on how Jared Parker calls this game and how Sam Hartman sees the field and what he's willing to do downfield. I've got a pretty good feeling about it. Again, Clemson is going to be – they're a good defensive team. They're still a really good defensive team. But I think Notre Dame's defense against that Clemson offense should be able to feast pretty similarly to what they did last year. Wake Forest, Sam Hartman's old team, like, are they able to throw some things at Hartman that, maybe make things difficult for him? I don't know. And then Stanford, the only thing that worries me about Stanford is watching the way they came back against Colorado.
Sure.
But I think I agree with you. I think, did you say 8? Was that your confidence?
Like 8.5, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's my confidence as well. But again, I think that if this game this weekend does not look sluggish and ugly, and it looks like Notre Dame has a vibrant pulse offensively, I feel I'd probably bump it up to even a 9, but I'm at a solid 8 right now.
Yeah, I don't want to be too crazy because, look, we've seen this team underachieve, right? And we saw them underachieve last year. I'm just hoping that this team has grown enough that we're not going to see that on down the stretch. But we'll see.
Yeah. With 4 games to go, scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you Sam Hartman will get to at least 30 touchdown passes in the regular season?
So let's break it down, right? He's got 18 touchdown passes going into the game with Pitt. So that means he needs 12.
Correct.
And I passed second grade math. He needs 12 with 4 games to go. That's 3 touchdowns per game.
Yeah.
Is it possible? Yes. My confidence level is standing at a 3.
Ooh,
Okay. I'm pretty low, to be honest with you. And I'm low because I don't know that he's going to play 4 full games. And so I think that's part of my issue here. I think
so you're so confident in the team and the offense that you think that they're going to.
I'm confident in the defense, but I feel like there's going to be enough of a gap.
Well, if he's not going to play, the whole game,
right,
then they've got to score some points as well.
Absolutely, but it could be very similar to like USC, where the defense is putting them in great position, where they've got short fields, they go down and you know what I mean. So like, I don't 3 touchdowns a game in 4 games. That's going to be tough to achieve, I think, on a consistent basis. So I'm just not confident that it's going to happen. Could it happen? Absolutely, absolutely. I would not be surprised. I'm just not willing to bet the farm on it.
18 touchdown passes for the season, as you mentioned. 13 of them came in the first 4 games. And we know who they played, obviously, in the first 4 games.
Look at you.
Only 5 the last 4 games. So the level of competition, like I'm very confident in at least 3 against both Wake Forest and Stanford. Like if I'm going to break this down. Again, Clemson degree of difficulty goes up a little bit. This team this week is the key to the whole thing. Like I think he could potentially get 4 because of how bad Pitt is in the back end.
So 4-2-3-3, he gets there.
Yeah. So I'm gonna say 7.5.
Look at you.
Push mine at 7.5.
Look at you. I'm usually the rose-colored glasses guy. I'm glad to have you fitted for him.
That's right. I have not given up on Sam Hartman. He's got rid of the beard.
Surprised there's not a rapid-fire question about that.
We did that earlier in the week, so we don't have to worry about that. People got mad. We were talking about it. What does this have to do with anything?
Come on now. Come on, people.
He's angel face Sam Hartman. Are you kidding?
Just baby face is beautiful.
That's right. So I think he's going to be close. What I'm personally more concerned about, I think like the Vegas number, I believe preseason 26.5. I'm pretty confident in that still right now, but Vegas is looking a lot better by placing that number the way they did. They're looking a lot better all the time.
Did you take 26.5?
I went over.
Yeah.
And he also needs roughly, I think it's like 800 yards to get the yardage over under. Let me log in here in just a second and I'll tell you.
So you took a little combo action, a little parlay, if you will, on season totals.
They wouldn't FanDuel anyway, would not let us parlay those 2 numbers. So I had to place individuals on each of them.
Okay.
So let me see here. I got to log in here. I got to do the, for some reason, it's not letting me.
Of course not, because we're doing live stuff.
Yes. Live TV. That really, or live. It's, do you have the thing where it gives you like you have to log in with a code that it texts to you kind of thing? Does yours ever do that?
No, it's just the face.
Here we go.
Face thing.
This is great podcasting.
Right, I know, now. But you know what?
Great audio.
You could cut it.
Okay, so he actually needs 1,100 yards.
Ooh, that's a lot.
The over/under for the season passing yards 2,950.5. He has 1,838 right now. So he needs 1,000. That's a pretty good pace that he needs to hit. But the touchdown over/under is 26.5.
I think you'll hit that one. I don't know about the yards, man.
Yeah.
That's going to be tough.
He only needs 9 more touchdown passes to get.
I feel pretty good about that one. I do. I feel pretty good about that one. I do not feel good about the yardage at this point. So you're going to break even.
Let me see here real quick. 1 plus.
Some higher math going on over there.
I know. So Man, this is going to be close. First 4 games of the season, he threw for 1,061 yards. And he needs a little bit more than 1,000 right now. He needs about that in these last 4 games to get the season yards over under. It is, especially again when you look at you got good defense like Clemson coming up.
Yep.
Okay, between Ohio State and Louisville, if you could only erase one of those 2 losses, which one would it be?
That's easy. It's Louisville. No doubt about it. I think if you had beaten Louisville, then the only loss that you're looking at is a last-second loss to Ohio State, who's currently undefeated. Now, you'd be rooting like heck for Ohio State to win out, basically, but you'd be 11-1. Well, okay, you wouldn't be 11-1 right now, obviously.
But you could be 11-1.
But you could be it by the time it's all said and done, right? It's absolutely Louisville because they just looked terrible against Louisville. They competed. They were winning the Ohio State game. And it happened so early on in the season as well, because I think that's also part of it, right? The committee is going to look at that and they would say, oh, it was early on in the season. They competed. They were there. They literally lost on the last play of the game. Yeah. I would absolutely give up the Louisville game because they just played terrible on both sides of the ball. It was just bad. The run defense, the run offense, all of it was really, really bad. They haven't looked that bad in any game so far this season. And if I could go back and erase that performance, this team, Sean, this team is a top 5 team, top 6 team at this point. If they've only
got an outside chance of still making the playoff if they beat Louisville.
I'd still feel pretty good about them.
Maybe even more than an outside chance. They'd be in the top 10 right now if they
easily. Because they were in the top 10. They were in the top 10 when they played Louisville, weren't they?
Yeah. And they're number 14 right now. They're already back up to number 14.
So, they would have absolutely climbed. And if you look at the AP poll right now, let's see. So you've got undefeated teams all the way down through Oklahoma. The 1-loss teams start at number 7 with Texas, right? You're telling me that Texas has lost?
Penn State, Oregon, Alabama, I think, is in there.
Yeah, it's Texas 7, Oregon 8, Alabama 9, Penn State 10.
Yeah.
So Notre Dame would be above all of them because Notre Dame's loss
would be to the best,
better
than
all of them.
Yeah.
They'd be 7 right now.
Yep.
They'd be 7. So, yeah, they would be sitting pretty, to be honest with you, in my opinion, because Ohio State or Michigan's going to lose, so they would drop.
But again, some people would tell you that the committee doesn't consider good or bad losses, but in that case, they absolutely would. It would absolutely matter.
You can tell me whatever you want. Notre Dame would have the best loss of any of those teams.
Right. And it would matter. It would factor into those rankings because there is a lot more human element in the playoff rankings than there is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
So like the old rivalries. Oh, and by the way, I agree with what you're saying. I get, like you kind of went on and I didn't even.
Sorry.
I completely agree. It would be Louisville for all the reasons that you said. So like the old rivalries against Purdue and Michigan State, Notre Dame versus Pittsburgh used to be a game that took place somewhat regularly. Would you like to see the Irish play any of those teams more often?
They have played Pitt 72 times.
Yeah.
That's a lot. And
they used to play, again, like until this ACC thing came up, they used to play them almost every year.
They've played Purdue, let me think now, 60, 85, 87 times. So, not that many more times, to be honest with you. And I think we would all say that Purdue is more of a traditional rival, I guess, for Notre Dame.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of surprised me, actually. I had to look it up after I saw the question. I was like, I know they used to play a lot, but I didn't realize it was as much as it was. I would like to see Notre Dame. If I was going to rank them, I would probably put Michigan State in 1, Purdue 2, Pittsburgh 3. I like the Purdue-Michigan State rivalries a lot more than I do Pitt, and I think a lot of that honestly has to do with Narduzzi. I'm going to say it. But I don't know. I don't get very excited when I hear the Pitt's on the schedule.
Yeah, me either.
I don't know.
Not nearly as exciting. It's like I would probably rank it the same way you ranked it. And, we were talking earlier about how Pitt was supposed to have a good defense. Kenny Pickett was the quarterback the last time Notre Dame played him, for that matter. And
that's right.
Notre Dame just smoked him that day. But I agree. None of those series have ever really done very much for me. Now, granted, I didn't grow up around here, so where you have a lot of these fans, especially of Purdue, Michigan, and Michigan State, who live in this area, right? In and around South Bend, you've got fans and alumni of those schools in this area. You don't really have that with Pittsburgh. So even though they used to play, quite a bit, it's like I'm fine with it being part of this ACC arrangement. You play them, but you don't have to play them all the time.
Right. Exactly. And that's how I feel about it too. I mean, as I'm looking at it, they kind of played almost every year for a while.
Yeah.
Yep. Really from as I'm looking at it all the way back. I mean, it
would have
been a very consistent team.
To play 70 sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about going like 30s and 40s.
Yeah.
Roughly. So,
but I mean, going all the way back to the turn of the century, for example, right? They didn't play in 2000, but they played in 2001. Notre Dame's only lost 4 times. 4 times in 23 years. Like, is that a rivalry? I don't know. And one of those losses was in 4 overtimes. I don't know. Maybe you could say the same thing about Purdue, obviously. I mean, if I was looking at it, I mean, Notre Dame hasn't lost to Purdue since 2007. Everybody beat Notre Dame then.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But, I mean, I don't know.
Surprise me.
I would just rather have an in-state rivalry as opposed to Pitt, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Which have you heard more about this week? Michigan's sign-stealing scandal or Marcus Freeman grilling Irish Illustrated's Tim O'Malley about his flag football coaching strategies?
Okay, first of all, the answer for me personally is Michigan's sign-stealing scandal. I've just seen that all over the place.
I agree.
But I didn't realize how much traction that our boy Tim O'Malley got.
I tell you what,
whole
man.
Thing.
I was sitting there, because it ended up making Sports Center, I think either that night or by the next night.
Did it really?
And it was all over the place. And then Wednesday morning, I'm sitting there watching Good Morning Football on the NFL Network.
I saw that.
And they start talking about it. And remember, this is the NFL Network. They predominantly talk about NFL stuff. They don't talk about a lot of college stuff. And Cal Brandt started breaking it down.
He went on a rant about how much he was on O'Malley's side.
I know.
And how, the kids are just worried about running around like crazy people. And he blamed the parents for him not having his 2 flags on.
I know.
Which I thought was hilarious.
You got to be, I think there's a little bit of truth to that. It's like
I know,
you're talking
right?
about 2nd and 3rd graders.
I've got a 3rd grader in my house. I can't imagine 15 of them all trying to go in the same direction. Can't imagine it. So, I thought that was pretty funny. So, I've heard more about Michigan, but I've enjoyed the Tim O'Malley stuff way more.
For sure.
Way more.
The O'Malley, Freeman. And I thought that was a really good way for Marcus Freeman to kind of have some fun, but also kind of jab back at, obviously not in a serious way, but sort of, he got to turn the tables. Because it's like you're juxtaposing, okay, whose responsibility is it to have that, to make sure that the kid has 2 flags? That's like, whose responsibility is it to make sure 11 players are on the field?
Exactly. 100%. And he's like, how about that play calling in the red zone?
It
was just,
that's right.
I really enjoyed it, and it was refreshing because it was an actual thought out joke, scenario.
He's like, I'm going to have some fun with this tomorrow.
That everyone could play along with, that everybody understood, and it was just well thought out, as opposed to, and here we go, the last regime where his jokes just fell hard. I mean, just you would be like, wow, I'm actually embarrassed for you, which is what would happen when we heard jokes from the last guy. So that was refreshing all by itself. And
True.
yes, I'm digging on Brian Kelly, and I don't care because Marcus Freeman is he's just a better guy. Just a better guy all around. I'll just say it.
And it came through with the way that he played.
Yes.
Played that up.
Yes.
You know?
Absolutely.
All right, a few game props on this before we make our prediction and finish up. So Notre Dame's favored by 20.5. The over-under is 44.5. I think those numbers are interesting when you look at them side by side. The fact that they're favored by almost 3 touchdowns, 20.5 points, but the game's over-under is 44.5. They've gone under 3 of the last 4 games on the point total that they've played.
I mean, you look at those side by side, basically Vegas is saying it should be like a 35-10 game. You know what I mean? Like, and that's just, I mean, that's a butt whooping of epic proportions. And I guess the minus 20.5 says that. I don't know what the over-under number is. Very interesting to me because
I think so too.
I think that there's a realistic chance Notre Dame could do that by themselves against this defense. I mean, I'm being serious. Like, maybe a defensive turnover here.
I think the defense / special teams could score a couple touchdowns.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, Notre Dame could do this on their own. Yeah. And so that makes it even more interesting when you put those numbers side by side. So
I agree. It's interesting. I'm not going to give away my prediction, but it's interesting what you just said about what Vegas thinks the score might be.
Right. Exactly.
I don't know. I'm not completely confident in betting the minus 20.5, but at the same time, again, we'll get to my prediction here in a little bit. I'm kind of in that ballpark. So, or I'm past that ballpark. So it's, I don't know.
I am too.
I don't know what it says about me.
I am too, but that's a big number, man. And like a garbage touchdown or, I just feel like something could screw that up. Which is why I would be more tempted to take the over here than the spread, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. Actually. I'm more confident in the point total over under as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Over under for Sam Hartman, 250.5 passing yards, 2.5 touchdown passes. Do you like either one of those numbers?
Better be over for both of them for you. I mean, it better be. No, I do like the over on touchdowns for sure.
Me too.
His yardage just hasn't been great the last few games. And so that does worry me.
He's only gone over that number 4 times this season. He did have 254 yards against Louisville, but of course that was his worst game this season.
That's true. I mean, the yardage one is scaring me off. I mean, if I had to pick one, I would say over just because of the 95th ranked passing efficiency defense that Pitt has coming into Notre Dame Stadium. Plus, it's going to be, I think, pretty decent weather. It's going to be in the afternoon. I think it's going to be ripe for throwing the football around. Nice fall day. I would take the over on both, but I'm more confident in the touchdowns.
I think so as well. And what adds to the uncertainty with that passing number is we just don't know how Jared Parker and company are going to call these games. What kind of plays they're going to call. It's just, I don't know. Christian Veillere, the Pitt quarterback, 177.5 yards.
You figure they're going to be behind. He's probably going to be throwing the ball around. I just don't know that he's going to be all that, productive. I'm again, the yardage one is just always so weird, but I would take the under here.
I think so as well. I think he could be in that vicinity, but I think that the Notre Dame defense is just going to be all over.
I think they're going to shut him down. I think he's going to find the turf a lot. I think, he's going to get sacked. I don't know. I think
there's going to be a lot of 3 and outs.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of 3 and outs.
I do. I think so too.
Let me do it this way. Tyree has an over-under of 30.5 yards. Mitchell Evans, 55.5. Which of those two are you more confident in the over?
Oh, that's easy. It's Chris Tyree. Anytime there's a 3 in front of the number for Chris Tyree, I'm taking the over. I'm taking it all day long. That's one play. And I think he's good for one play a game. And so I would take Chris Tyree. Now, I think Mitchell Evans has an opportunity, but we've seen teams focus on him and take him out. And I would say that that's still a positive strategy if you are the defensive coordinator for Pitt, because what are we expecting from the outside receivers? What do we, I would still focus on Mitchell Evans, and so I would take Chris Tyree here.
Interesting. Tyree has been over 50% of the time. I thought that in that string of Louisville, Duke, and Ohio State, he had a little bit more than what he had, but he was in the 20s in all those games. So he's basically 4-4 going over. I'm more confident in him as well. And again, it's in part because Pitt has a better chance of defending those intermediate throws to the tight ends than they do like if Chris Tyree gets loose a little bit downfield. So I'm much more confident in Chris Tyree being over with his. Sibo Flemister, 51.5 yards. Audric Estime, 94.5 yards are their over-unders.
I'm taking the under on both on this one.
Me too.
I think the Notre Dame defense is just going to shut Sibo down. They do remember Sibo. unlike Phil, they remember Sibo, and I don't think they're going to let him get loose. And I just don't know. I'm just not feeling this being an Audric Estime game, and I'm also kind of the thought process. Not that you're shutting him down. I'm not saying that, but you know what? A few less carries a game at this point in the season, I don't think that's such a terrible thing for Audric, for his future and for the future of this season. So I would just say under on both.
And that's at this point in the season, I think that it makes more sense. A lot of people have wanted more of Jeremiah Love. I just think that it makes more sense to go to Jeremiah Love. Fresher legs, the chance for more explosive plays. And then you kind of go back to that formula where maybe Audric Estime is kind of closing things at the end type of thing. But I'm under on both of these guys as well. I'm just like Estime was just over against USC with 95 yards. Not as confident against, even though Pitt's linebackers are beat up, but again, I'm more confident in their front seven than I am in their secondary.
Right.
So
yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
All right, game prediction time. What do you got?
This is tough, man. Because I do have a lot of faith in the defense. I do. I have more faith in the offense than maybe I should, just because of what this Pitt defense is going to be bringing to the table. And I think once Sam Hartman gets back on track, I feel like the sky's the limit. And I just think that he's going to be able to put up some yards and some points and that whole thing. So for me, I'm looking. I was kind of in the neighborhood when I said it before when we were talking about the over under. That's kind of where I'm at, to be honest with you. I'm thinking like 38-10. 38-10 is what I'll say.
It's funny because we had to send Brian our score predictions today.
We did, and I haven't done it yet.
I did mine this afternoon. Already sent it to him, and I always check before we start the show so that I get the same prediction.
Stay on brand. That's right.
35-10 is what I sent him.
I almost said 35-10. I was real close because that's what I mentioned earlier in the show.
We've been very close all year long with a lot of our score predictions, and we don't confer on any of it. But like you said, like what you were talking about earlier, when you said Vegas thinks this is going to be about a 35-10 game, you about knocked me out of my seat when you said that. I just think Notre Dame's defense is just going to again swarm this young quarterback. Not very good offense at all. I think there's going to be a lot of 3-and-outs for Pitt. And again, if Notre Dame's offense is really going to thrive, it's going to be with some shots downfield. They're going to have to do that to loosen things up and give them the chance to run the ball as well. But I think that the defense should once again put the offense in a really good position to make some hay.
And that's the key right there. I think there's going to be some turnovers. I think there's going to be some short fields. I think the offense is going to take advantage, and I think the point total is going to climb. It's just depending on how fast can that point total get as high as we would like it to be. And if it does do that, how quickly are they putting in some backups? How quickly are you shelving Sam Hartman and Audric Estime and, the like to get some of these other guys some time, because we are in the tail end. And I don't know if that rule about the bowl game counting against your red shirt is still in play or not. I've heard both over the last few days.
Oh, it does. It's still, it's 4 games, regardless of it's a,
because last year they took away the bowl game and it didn't count.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that.
The bowl game was a free game for whatever reason. I don't remember the reasoning behind it.
Oh, you're right. And then we were talking about that after the fact. It's like, it would have been nice if they knew this during the regular season. You're right. I forgot about that.
Yeah.
Would have been nice if they knew in the regular season so they could make some of those redshirt decisions.
Right. So I don't know if that's the same for this year or not, if that's like a rule, or if that was a 1-year thing.
I have to look that up. I have to look that up this week now that you mentioned it.
I honestly don't know, but we're at the point where we're 4 games left, right? We had that conversation about, do you redshirt, do you not redshirt certain guys, Now those are the decisions that you're going to have to start making. And so in garbage time, in, all of that, are we putting in different guys? What is it going to look like? So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how those decisions are made and if they start to be made here coming up against Pitt.
We'll wrap it up with that. Vince, enjoyed it as always. I will talk to you next week. Next week's going to be a little kind of all
wonky.
over the place, because
wonky.
I'm going to France with women's basketball, and we're trying to get things pieced together. There'll at least be a few shows next week. We might not have quite as many as always, but there'll be some shows anyway. Yes.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Bonsoir. Yeah, I'll get it all figured out. All right. Enjoy the game, and we will talk to you next week on IB Nation Sports Talk.